Now we're going to look into your first attack using the kimono from the rear, and that is the sliding collar choke. This is kind of the foundation of a lot of rear chokes using the kimono. Okay, again, with this one, it's very important you focus on the details of placement of your hand, placement of the choking mechanisms, and the connection. Okay, so when we use the kimono and we choke with the kimono, generally there's going to be two ways that this works. I'm either using the kimono to hold my wrist, my hand in place and somehow choke with my arm, or I'm using the kimono itself to choke. Occasionally there'll be ones that use both. This one is going to be, this one I'm going to be using the kimono to lock my hand in place and use my wrist and my arm to do the choke. Okay, so can I get you to go ahead and sit here, please? We're going to start with our over-under position. Now, these guys have heard me say this a million times. There's 3 steps to getting your hand in the correct position. Okay, can I choke a kimono? Nope, it's dead. It was never alive. You can't kill it. So people go with these crazy like wham, and they're grabbing the gi really hard and punching their hand into the gi. The gi isn't going to choke. His neck is going to choke. So my focus in this situation is putting my hand where I want it to be against his neck and then bringing the kimono to my hand and locking my hand in place. And that will make a big difference between the amount of energy you'll have to use to finish this choke. Okay, so there's 3 steps. We're going to start with the over-under. The underneath hand, I'm going to open the kimono. When I open it, I want to turn it out. Mostly because this gives me more access to further around the neck. Okay. Step 2 is I put my hand where I want it to be against his neck. Step 3, and the one that everybody leaves out, is I put the kimono in my hand. My hand never goes looking for the gi. So it's not step 1 and step 2, because there's gap right there. Okay, and then as I pull, I'll close off the gap, but all that pulling to close off the gap was pulling that wasn't happening against his neck. So I go 1 and 2. Now, for the sliding collar choke, my general rule is I bend my wrist, and I want the bend of my wrist directly underneath his chin. There'll be ones where I go here, here, here. This one, I'm going right there. Notice when I do this, my hand is wide open. I'm not reaching for his gi with a claw. Okay, I want my hand wide open so that when I put my gi in my hand, it's all the way flat in my palm, and when I close, I'll have a maximum grip. The other thing is by doing this, turn your head, tuck your chin, here. If I go like this, he's going to turn his head, tuck his chin, all of this. So this hand is not only keeping his chin up, it's keeping his head turned. Okay, so it's just like this, tight to his neck. If he wanted to peel my hand off right now, here. If he wanted to peel my hand off now, it's a lot harder to do. Okay, so I go 1, put my hand in place. Again, I see this all the time. People cannot resist the temptation to start reaching for the gi. And right now, even if I was pretty good about it, he could tell you there's still a gap, maybe 2 fingers deep here. Which also means, yeah, like he did, he can get his hands in that gap. Okay? If I go like this and put it, there's no place for him to get his hand in the gap. Okay, so the analogy I use, these guys have heard it, the kids' classes have heard it. It's who does the hunting with the lions, the male or the female?
The female lion.
The male does what? He just sits under the tree with his mouth open. The female goes, gets the food, puts it in his mouth. Okay, it's why it's good to be a male lion. Okay, so I open, this is the female, she goes, gets the food, the male lays under the lion tree with his mouth open, the female puts the food in his mouth. Now when I put the food in, I don't want to put the skinny part where if he pulls out, here. I want to put the flat, that's another reason I turned it. So I put the flat in my hand is wide open, and then it closes here. Okay, so we're going to put that together. Let's turn this way just slightly. I go 1, 2, I'm pushing into his head. 3, I punch the gi hard into my hand. I haven't closed my hand yet. My thumb is inside. Now I close. Now you can tell it's very tight. Okay, I could probably just choke him right here. Okay, so In a real situation, you may not get that right away. You may start down here, but each time I open, I slide my hand up, I open, I slide my hand up, I open, I push into his neck, I punch the gi into my hand. Okay, but we're gonna go ahead and work on the ideal situation. So, once I have my hand, the back of my hand is in his neck. I want the bone into his neck. So as I fed, I'm gonna keep it loose this time. As I fed the gi into my hand, now I'm gonna rotate so that the bone is going directly into his neck. Remember I talked about we want the force going directly into the submission hold. So it's not going down and it's not going up. I want the bone to be directly straight back towards me. So I go here, I open, hand is open, push it into my hand, rotate. Now my other hand is gonna find the other lapel, thumb in. And all I'm gonna do is, you don't have to go high. I'm just gonna grab it where I can. In fact, I don't wanna go too high, it'll get in the way. And I'm gonna pull it down. So all this does is it takes a little bit of slack out on this side and counters the choke, okay? So, 1, 2, I'll go a little bit loose, down, pull the slack out. Now, where people have trouble with this choke is they're taught, I've often heard taught to cut the person's throat, to pull across. And that'll work, but it's gonna take a lot of energy because it's actually turning his head and now you're pushing into the neck. So I do all that work and then I pull this way and I'll get it eventually, but really I'm just pushing on one side of his neck and often it's sliding to the neck muscle. What I want to do is, my wrist is like this when I grab, I rotated it, I'm gonna extend that wrist bone straight into his trachea. Okay, so it's a little bit of a trachea crush. And then as with our rear naked choke, I'm pinching my shoulder blades and taking a big breath. That's where the power comes from. This. My elbow will pull back tight to my body, but I'm not pulling across, okay? So I go here, I'll keep it a little bit loose, I pull the slack out. I'm gonna extend the wrist bone, bring my shoulders back, drive my elbow back to my ribs. Here, so I'm not pulling this way. I go, hand is wide open, I punch in tight, you'll see how little this makes. I close, I pull the slack out, extend the wrist, big breath, shoulders, okay? That is our sliding collar choke. I can't emphasize enough the 3 steps to the choke. This applies for many, many collar chokes. 1, put your hand, or whatever choking mechanism that needs to be, tight to the neck. You're choking the neck, not the gi. So I want to connect, my whole focus on the connection. All the grip does, I say this all the time, all the grip does is secure connection. People come up with fancy grips. It's irrelevant if the connection is bad. So I can have whatever fancy grip I want, but if the connection isn't there, the choke isn't there. So connected, 1, connected, tight, 2. Now there's 0 space there. Rotate, slack out, shoulder blades, wrist extension, in. And that is our sliding collar choke.